Nerds. Let me plug in my cool-ass drawing tablet in case I can find a reason to use it. So, what do I want to tell you about? Well, basically, there's a lot of other work I should be doing, so I want to do this more, because this will be more fun. So, what did we do with ASCII Adventure earlier today? Well, we accomplished a few things. We made some significant improvements, in that we now have objects that are passable, so you can like walk over them and everything works. So that's great. And we did that in an earlier video today. But now, this got me thinking that I've got this problem where, if we look at our screen class up here, we've got this array of game objects, and this is fine. You can put walls in there, you can put treasures in there, but it's a little bit weird for players and for mobs, because we already had this problem where we can't really have player be in the 2D grid for GameObject. That's not really going to work. And the reason we can't do that is if the player is going to move over objects, then we have this problem. Either the player is in a particular location in the grid, or like, for example, a treasure is. The player can't walk over a treasure, or can't like walk over a doorway or something like that. And we might want the player to be able to do that. So what we did is we made player an instance variable that exists inside the screen. And then when we were drawing it, we would sort of like draw everything, and then we would go ahead and like plop in the player on top of things, so that way the player could move over stuff. So this is really cool. But here's the problem. I was thinking about this a little more, and I'm like, okay, so, we can move the player around. First of all, it's really sloppy with the mobs, because now if we look at Adventure, a lot of things have been driving me crazy about these mobs. I just went ahead and, like, created a list of mobs and just randomly added one at location 99, bottom right of the screen. That's fine, but, this is like just this random list of things that exists like basically inside. I mean, I called it run, but it's basically the main method, because look at what main does. It creates an instance of game and just calls run. So I may as well literally have stuck everything in main. Like I've basically done, what we tell intro students never to do. So, I've like completely done everything wrong here. So really we should have a list of mobs. But now if we have a list of mobs inside screen, what does that mean? Well, now mobs also have to be in a situation where, as they move around, we want mobs to be able to walk over treasures and mobs to be able to pass over passable things, just like players can. So we would sort of like draw everything, or I mean, we don't literally draw everything. We go through every row and column, and if there's no player or mob there, then we go ahead and draw whatever's there. So that way players and mobs can move over things. Or at least we're about to sort of move the mobs into screen and take care of it that way. But this has this other question, because somebody, I think it was Anastasia D, was working on this to have a better inventory. We've got this notion of an inventory. Maybe you can pick up the treasures. Maybe you can pick up weapons. Maybe you can have multiple different weapons to choose from, and you have to make one of the weapons active. So those are all great ideas. The problem is, what type do you have in your inventory? Well, do you have, like, a list of GameObject? That's a little bit weird, because there are some objects that make sense to be in your... There are some game objects that make sense to be in your inventory. Like, for example, treasures or weapons. There's some game objects, like walls, that don't make any sense to be in your inventory. What, like you're carrying around like a wall in your pocket? Like what that's weird. Nobody carries around walls in their pockets. So we don't really want that. So I was thinking, like, okay, some game objects can be acquired by the player and some can't. So we could imagine having like game object, and then a type of game object would be, a like inventory object. And then subclasses of inventory objects could be, weapon and treasure and whatever else. And so those can both be sort of in the screen, but also things that the player can acquire. Then there's some objects which are like, not that. Like, for example, walls, or, teleporters, where the player can't pick up a wall or a teleporter. Those are stationary objects that players can't pick up and can never be part of the inventory. So we actually could do a little bit more with this inheritance hierarchy to kind of like give us a sense of what we're doing. Now, if we're going to do that, then moving game objects like players and mobs, they actually don't need to be game objects at all, because they're never going to actually go into the screen. We're just going to... They need to have a row and column, because we're going to draw them on the screen, but they never need to go into this. They don't need to go into here. If we sort of break that hierarchy, then we could have, like, instead of moving... So here's what I'm getting at. We've got this game object, and then one of our most important and interesting game objects is moving game object. And then both player and mob inherit moving game object, which is great. And this has all the logic in it for how to move and things like that. But let's think about this logic. Mostly it's just a delta row and a delta column, and we ask the screen, which is one of our instance variables, like a whole bunch of information, and figure out where we can move to. And then finally down here, we go ahead and move it unless it's the player. Right? But that's sloppy, having this if in here, like, if the current instance is of type player, don't actually change the screen and move it at all, right? Because we don't act like the players aren't really in the game object grid at all inside screen. We just sort of draw them over the top. Well, if all of a sudden, moving game object is no longer a game object, if it's just like movable thing, and then player and mob both inherit from that, it can still have a reference to the screen and figure out what to do with the screen. It's just part of a different inheritance hierarchy, because players and mobs, because they're movable, they're not stationary objects, they're not gettable objects like inventory objects like weapons and treasures and things like that, then it makes more sense to move them around. We don't have to do these little hacks. Because, like, look at this hack we had to do here in the player constructor. So we put the player at a particular row, at a particular column. We have to pass it the screen. We have to give it a name. We have to call a base class constructor, which makes a whole bunch of assumptions about, because player extends moving game object, which is a game object. And because it's a game object, where have we always been putting it? Boom, we've been putting it inside the grid. But we're not putting players and mobs inside the grid anymore, so they don't have to be game objects. We can, like, create some totally new inheritance hierarchy for that. So that's what I'm thinking about with this refactoring. Now, what's the point of this video? I mean, I don't know. It's almost midnight. Am I going to write this code? I'm not really sure. Really what I want to highlight here is the thought process. What I'm doing is called refactoring. Watch this. Oh, can I draw on this? Here we go. Wait a minute. Where's my little drawing tool? Yeah. Okay. Whoops. Let me get that out of the way. Drawing tool. Is this the drawing tool? Yeah. Boom. Watch this. Wow, this is crap. Refactoring. And then we'll go. Boom. That looks real bad. Oh, and then it just goes away? That's how we're going to do it, Loom? That's what's going to happen? We're just going to, like, make this text disappear when we're done with it? How do I make it stay? But I want it to stay. Don't go away. It just disappears. Honest to God, that is utterly... I can make the line thicker. Okay, great. I can change the color to blue. A thick blue line. It's still going to disappear. Why is it disappearing? How is that useful? Jesus. All of that just to write the word refactoring. This is a crap feature. Anyway. Okay. As I was saying, what we're doing here is called refactoring. We've got this code. We've identified some weaknesses, some limitations, some things that are bothering us, and we feel like we can go in and have it keep the same functionality but make some changes to it so that it's more flexible, it better supports the features that we want to have. We can make it easier to support features we might like to add in the future, and just overall make the code better. This is really important because there's a fine line in software development between kind of like over-engineering something and under-engineering it and then being stuck with bad decisions. You don't want to over-engineer code. So you don't want to, try to write, a 50,000 line program that handles every possible use case just so you can have like some script that, like automates, I don't know, sending you a wake up email in the morning or something like that, right? You don't need every possible bell and whistle and feature for that. Something fairly simple probably is going to work pretty well. So you want to start with the simplest thing possible, because when you're building software, your time to get the software done and to show it to the client, like how long to get a first draft to them to get feedback so that you can make improvements and evolve the software closer to what your client actually wants, that's really important. That amount of time is very valuable. You don't want to take on a project and spend a year building some huge infrastructure and then you show it to the person paying for it and they're like, ooh, I don't like that. I think we're going to go in a different direction with our software development team. Like, you never want to do that or hear that. So you want to get things out the door quickly so that you can show it to people and get feedback and start making those improvements. But in order to do that, you're going to have to make quick and dirty decisions. I mean, I'm not saying quick and dirty like use an array for everything and never use a list. Like, use the right data structures, use the right algorithms, use all the basic things but in terms of like these kinds of object-oriented decisions we're making, like, okay, at the time we did it, it totally made sense to have, and when I say we, I mean me, at the time I did it, it made sense to have a two-dimensional array of GameObject because I had a player who moved around, and I didn't really think at that time about players moving over treasures and occupying the same square, and I was just worried about, like, can I have walls that the player can't walk through and then a mob that can kill the player? That's really all I was thinking. So I got the minimum functionality to get that to work. But now that we're adding new features, we need to evolve our code. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're as we find these weaknesses, we can make the improvements to make things better as we find the problems and the weaknesses to make the improvements. We don't, in other words, we didn't spend like 6 months building this. Like, I spent, a couple of days tinkering around with some stuff and making some videos so that I could have this code available for you to work with this term. If I had waited until it was perfect, that would have caused two problems. One, it never would have been ready, and we still would have been doing like the really crappy, not fun to play text-based version of Minesweeper that didn't really work very well last year. Not a great assignment. So that wouldn't have been good. The second problem would have been the better engineered the code is when I give it to you, the less you're going to learn from, kind of like my mistakes. And what I mean by that is you're writing all of your code, you're working on all of your code. Right now, you're running into problems. You're doing instance of checks in enough places that it becomes annoying. You're not able to walk over things without them disappearing, so you're running into this issue that everything's a game object. You've got this whole list of mobs sitting inside the main method that you can't access from anywhere else very easily. All that stuff is annoying. And so you kind of want to fix that stuff and make these improvements. And so you're able to do that. You're in a position where you can see and feel, like viscerally feel the limitations of the code. That makes you motivated to learn more about how to fix it. If I were to just like give you pristine working code version where everything was great, you probably wouldn't run into those same problems. There's always that sort of fine line there. Anyway, how long has this video been going on? I have no idea. I'll keep going just because I can always cut it off here. I can stick in an iMovie and do some editing. Yeah, okay, so what would this let's think about this now. What's this refactoring going to look like? So one of the things we're going to do is have two subclasses of GameObject. One of them's going to be like InventoryObject, and one of them's going to be like obstacle or stationary object that you can't pick up or something along those lines. And then walls are going to extend from one, and the other one we're going to get inventory, like weapons and treasures and keys. Another thing would be keys. Like that would be really cool. You'd have keys. You have to pick up keys to open doors. So we could do stuff like that. So that's sort of one thing. And then the other thing would be to get player and mob like out of the inheritance hierarchy for GameObject. Just make them not inherit from that at all. So which of these do I want to do first? The other thing is I don't want to do both of these at the same time. I want to do one of them and then the other one. And I think the easier one, probably also the less interesting one, is what to do with GameObject so I can have an inventory for the player. So how do I want to do that? GameObject, that looks fine. All of this looks okay for the GameObject. So really all this means is I'm going to have, and this is an abstract class, so I'm going to make the subclass abstract as well. I'm going to say public abstract class, and I'll call it InventoryGameObject, and I'll just extend GameObject. Now watch this. What am I going to do here? Nothing. I don't think I'm going to do anything. Do I need a constructor? No, because I'm going to inherit a constructor. I think that's all I'm going to do. And I think for this, I'm going to say public abstract class. Do I want to call it stationary GameObject? Or GameObject? Well, I guess here's something that's interesting. I've got an inventory GameObject, and I'm going to have things that inherit from that. I don't need a second class. So watch this. Watch this. Inventory GameObject. I'll put a note in here. These can be acquired by the player. And the other one I won't. Moving GameObject I'm just going to ignore for now. So wall is now wall still a GameObject, breakable wall still a GameObject. That's fine. Treasure is now an inventory GameObject. Does that work? That works. So now my hierarchy is GameObject, and then there's a bunch of things that are GameObjects like walls and whatever else, and then inventory GameObject. And only inventory GameObjects can be acquired by the player. What this means is here in player, I would add something like, and what would I do? Well, whatever. I'll put it up. I'll put it up here. I would say, well, yeah, it's fine. No, I'll put it under the constructor. I don't know why the constructor is at the top. I'll do something like private list of inventory GameObject inventory equal new list of yeah. Boom. Right? That's a thing. Yeah. And so that would work. And so now only inventory GameObjects like treasure and weapon and key could go in there. Whereas if I try to just put a regular GameObject in here, it's not going to work. Because again, I can put an inventory GameObject anywhere I'm expecting a GameObject. Because the GameObject is higher on the inheritance hierarchy. But anywhere I'm expecting an inventory GameObject, I can't just put any GameObject, right? Because there are things that are GameObjects, like a wall, that are not inventory GameObjects. Now, I don't have any logic for this yet. I'm just explaining the types. That will definitely work. So that's awesome. I would need to, like, pick up the treasure and add it to my inventory, which I don't really feel like doing, so I just won't. But I'm pretty sure this will work for this. Oh, wait, I'm going to... Whew, yeah, this is the problem with making videos at like 11:45 or 11:30 or whatever time it is. Yeah, it's like 5 minutes till 12 and I'm tired. Okay, so we got that. Now, the other thing we want to do is make move. So we need some other notion of something GameObject that isn't... Yeah. I mean, this is fine. I'm cool with this. Now, the other issue is, I mean, let me show you the biggest problem with player. So, player's no longer going into the screen, right? Up here, we had this list of this 2D array of game objects. Player normally, like, calls the base class constructor for game object. Let's look at the game object constructor way the heck up here. When you construct something, you give it a screen, boom. That's what the game object constructor does. It puts into the screen at a given row and column the current reference, which means like the current thing, whatever it is. If it's a player, if it's a wall, whatever the current instance we just created is, it sticks it into the screen because, again, the screen is expecting to have this 2D grid of game objects. But that's no good. We don't actually want that for a player because the player doesn't go in there. So we have this hack in here. We're like, okay, well, when I create a player, this base constructor from GameObject is going to stick the player in the screen. I'll just go ahead and remove the player from the screen. That's really sloppy, right? We don't actually want that. Like, we really don't want to do that. That's very sloppy. Yawning again. Ooh, so I think we just don't want this to be a game object. We want it to be movable, but not a moving game object. So probably what we should do is go in here and look at movable game object or moving game object, and we'll get rid of this. So we don't want this to be a game object. It's weird to call it moving game object because it implies it is a game object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just keep the name the same, but start mucking around with the code, and then I'll change the name last. So this just called the base class constructor, but now we can't do that because this isn't a game object anymore. So this is a movable thing, so it's like a player or a mob. Well, what does that need to know? Well, it needs to know public int row, and I need a get and a protected set. It needs public int column, which needs a get and a protected set. Sometimes you will see people do these on one line like this. I tend to just break them up a little bit into multiple lines. We don't have a base class constructor anymore. Oh, we need to set a token for these. So row equal row, column equal column. These are both gorgeously calling these set methods. That is just so cool. We need a token, so that would be public string token, which would have a get method and a protected set method. For the token, so we would need to assign token equal token. Now screen, this is the other, and I haven't solved this yet, but the other problem is that it's actually really sloppy for the screen to know about its game objects, like walls and whatever else, and for the walls also to know about screen. Now the reason I do that is that game objects can call delete to delete themselves. You know, we just call delete on it, and then the game object gets rid of itself. What does getting rid of itself mean? Well, it means telling the screen that your previous coordinates, the row and column where you were located, are now null. So that's the number one reason why it's really important for game objects to have a reference to the screen. There's a lot of yawning. I really should. Maybe I need more caffeine. Oh, great. Now you get to hear me drinking. That's great. All right. So there we got that. Row, column, token. I guess, you know what? Whatever. I'll just keep the screen. Let's do this. Public screen. I don't know if this works. Screen get protected set. Like, can I do that? Can I have this name be the same as that name? I don't know. We'll find out. We shall find out. Screen equals screen. That's really all that this needs to know. I don't think it... And so for move, yeah, we check this. We ask our screen if the new location is in bounds, which is legit. This is just calling a method on our screen. This is basically the fancy... It's an attribute. So this is essentially calling the get method to get the screen, and then calling this method on it. This gets the game object at the new location and checks if it's null and not passable. Or if it's not null and not passable, then we basically crashed into something, which right now just returns a string. This method, this move method, I had return a string, which really makes no sense. Like, I could have had it return Boolean, which would be like true if the move is legal and false otherwise. That would have been a thing that I could do. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. But what I do know is... Oh, I just thought of something cool. Well, anyway, we'll see. Okay, game object. Yeah, I mean, I could just... this is driving me crazy. I had to return a string. It's not clear what I'm not doing anything with these strings, so I should just have it return true or false. Not what I'm messing with right now. So if we make the move, right, we generated a new row and a new column. We checked, okay, if it's not in bounds, in other words, you're like trying to move off screen, no. You know what? I will just make this Boolean. Boolean. Return false. Can't make that move. If we crash into something, walls just stop you, objects can be picked up, people can be interacted with. Who knows? We crashed into something, let's also return false. Right, we're not going to make the move. Otherwise, we can make the move, right? Because we're not out of bounds, and we didn't hit an immovable object. So what does that mean? Well, we're saving the original row and column, and then we're changing the row and column. Now, before we would like update the screen, now we're not doing that. Now we're just going to return true, which seems fine. And we can get rid of all that. I like that. I really like that. Well, now this is totally worthless because they don't need these. I needed these. Okay, let me undelete. I needed these before because I needed to set the original location to null and then set the new location to this. I guess I don't really need these. I could I don't know. There's things I could do that would make this look cleaner. But anyway, I don't care. I'm not going to do any of them. I don't need these variables is what I'm getting at. And we're not actually changing the location of the object because it's not, like, that's not how we're moving these things. Okay, cool. I'm going to go with that. This is also implying that this should be in a different file, right? This moving game object, because it's not really a game object anymore. It's now a movable thing. Okay, so that seems legit. I hope that's okay. Now, player is one of those... And I don't think I have mob open. Oh, but mob... Okay, here's the other thing that's sloppy, is when things move, you know, this is moving the player. So this is telling the player to move. Well, that's just calling this method. Where'd that move method go? No, where'd player go? No, it's in GameObject. Yeah. That's calling this method, which is just figuring out, like, would it be legal to move on my given screen? If so, it just adjusts the player's row and column, which is actually great, because if you remember how the toString method works, wherever the hell the toString method is here, no, it's in screen, not adventure. Yeah, if we look at this thing's toString method, now what it's doing is it's going through all the rows and columns, and it's checking, like, okay, is my main character, which is basically the player, like, is it at the given row and column? If it is, then that's what we're putting here. Like, we're putting the player there. Otherwise, we're not putting the player there. That's really cool. Now, if we have a whole bunch of mobs, then we have to also check these mobs. We have to, like, check each mob. I'm going to do it with a linear scan. It's fine. I could do it faster, but I don't really care. Because I don't think speed is going to be the issue right now. Okay, so that gets us our movable game object, which isn't really a game object at all. Okay, that is super cool. So now, the next thing I'm going to do is go back here to screen, and I'm going to, what am I going to do? Is a legal move. Huh. Right, I'm going to give this, I made this internal, because I don't, well, whatever, I'll make this internal as well. Internal, how do I tell it I want to have a property that's a list of mobs? I don't think I do. I think I do something like this. I think I do private list of mobs equal new list of mob. And then I think I have a public void add mob. No. Add mob. Mob m. And then I would do mobs dot add m. I think that's what I would do. I would just be able to add a bunch of mobs. I think I'm going to slouch down. Sorry for the, sorry for that. Okay, so I'm going to do that. That's cool. So this is looking good. I think that's fine. So that means over here in Adventure, in our main, instead of doing this, which is always just I've found bad, what we're going to do is, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. That's terrible. We're going to take the screen and add the mob at the the new mob to the given location. So now the screen owns all the mobs. So down here, this loop shouldn't be here anymore. Now it should be in screen. What I'm thinking is one of the things that this can do is it can break the loop. It can set game over to true, right, and end this loop. So what I'm going to do, okay, I'm literally just going to take this code. I'm going to cut it. Now move the mobs. I'm going to do screen dot move mobs. And I'm going to assume, actually, here's what I'm going to do. Game over equal, I think it's called game over. Yeah, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this. I'm going to make that code I just cut. I'm going to make it a method in screen, and I'm going to have it return true if one of the mobs kills the player and false otherwise. So here we are in screen. We've got this list of mobs. I'm going to do public boolean move mobs. I'm just going to plop this code in. Wow, that did a lot more of the whole. That's better. That's better. Okay, so we're going to go through each mob in mobs. The name lines up. That's good. We've got our tuple. Do we have access to a screen in here? Well, this is the screen. So we can just change screen to this. So this gets all the legal moves for a particular location for the mob at row and column. And if that mob can't move for some reason, we just continue. That's good. Otherwise, this is our fancy pants way of like getting, like deconstructing this tuple. I'm going to note that. Awesome destructuring. Structuring of the tuple. So we sort of get that. Now, player. Do we have the player? We do, but it's not called player. It's called MC for main character. MC. So we're checking if the player's row is equal to the mob's row plus the move, and the player's column is equal to the mob's column plus the move. Okay. And if we did, then we change the mob to a splat. Now, there's this issue as to whether we're going to draw the mob on top of the player or the player on top of the mob. I don't really know. We have this message, which again, so we're no longer, this doesn't happen anymore. we're just going to return true at this point. And the message, we don't have a message anymore. Okay. Otherwise, we tell the mob to move. Which is fine. That moves the mob a certain amount. So the mob's in a new position. Okay. That seems legit. So this is checking, did we splat the player? If we did, then we change the mob's token and return true. Well, here's the problem. We actually still need to make this move. Okay, so... At this point, we know the mob's going to move. The mob's going to move. So, if it got the player, then return true, else return false. And so this makes sure that no matter what happens, the mob moves. Okay, that's fine. And that's in screen. So now all we need is... all we need is the toString over here. And I'm going to do this linear, which I know everyone's going to be like, Spacco, why are you doing everything linear? What the hell's wrong with you? So for each row and column, if we hit one of the players, check there. Else, I guess what we'll do... How would we do this? We need to iterate through each mob. So we're checking to see if it's the player, and if it is, put the player's token. Otherwise, get the game object and check a game object. So actually, before we do any of that, we actually want to check all the mobs. How do we do that since we want to look through a whole list? Do we just iterate through the list? Well, really what we want to do is check else if, row and column matches any mob, which is... Okay, the way to do this is really to map the mobs. Basically to have a way to say, take this row column and look up where a mob is located. But that's just saying we need a second grid of mobs, which is the other thing I was thinking of, 10 minutes ago when I was like, oh, I have an idea. So the idea, right now the screen has this grid. What I'm getting at is we could also have this. We could also have private moving game object, right? Boom. Movables. And then we just, plop the player and the mobs in there. So we sort of have two layers. One for stationary objects and inventory items, and one for stuff that can move, right? So... that's what we would do. And so then the player and the mobs, those are literally immovable. So that way, for any row column that we're drawing, first we check movable. If there's a movable in there, boom, that's what we... Why don't I just do that? Why don't I just do that? I mean, that's fine. Now, this is a little weird, because remember, our overloading is for this. Right, we overloaded the square bracket operator. That's for grid. That's interesting, but not quite what we're going for. Because now we have this, other layer of stuff here. Okay, I'm not going to do it this way yet. I should do it this way. This is the right thing to do, but I'm getting tired, and I don't want to do it that way yet. I'm going to go back down here to... this method. Where's the toString? Where are you? toString? Hello? Hello? Yeah, good. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it the stupid way. Boolean. Okay, what gets drawn first? First we draw, is the player more important than a mob, or a mob more important than the player? I think if a mob splats a player, we draw the mob splat. Otherwise, we draw the player. Yeah, good. Okay, Boolean found equal false. No, I'll call it mob kill equal false. For each mob m in mobs, right? If m.row equal r and m.column equal c, then result dot append m.token, right? The mob's token, and then I would say mob kill equal true, and then break. Now, when I get to here, if mob kill, in other words, if any of these mobs in here, because as soon as I find a mob that, is it a mob kill? No, it's not a mob kill. It's not a kill. Mob found. Mob found. Right. If I found a mob, then I don't need to do any of this stuff. Right, so I certainly don't want to draw a game object because the mob might be on top of the game object, and I don't want to draw the player because if the player is under the mob, then the mob splatted the player, and we want to draw the mob splat symbol. So if mob found, what do I do? Well, I continue. Right, and so what the continue is going to do is it's just going to go up to the next column. And so for every row and column, we have to check all the mobs for every row and column and then check the player. So the reason that this is inefficient is this is a linear scan through all the mobs for every grid square, which is inefficient. It would be better to just look it up in a second layer where we could just say, given a row and a column, is there a mob there? That would be the more efficient way to do it, would be to have this like extra layer for just movable stuff. That's the right way to do it, but I'm pretty sure this will work, so I can just test it and see if like it looks reasonable and I can move my mobs around and everything with my better code. That's what I'm going for. But really the right thing to do, and I'll even put a to do here. To do convert mobs and players into a second layer of moving, into a second grid layer of moving game object. And I probably also need to change the name game object because that one's no good. Yeah, okay. Let's see if any of this compiles. Of course it doesn't. Player is passable. Oh, no suitable override. Okay. Player, line 19. Player. So that's because player used to extend game object, but now it doesn't. And so this we're trying to override as passable. I don't need to override as passable anymore because player's not a game object anymore. We're complaining about list. That's in player. That's easy. I need to be using what is it? I'll just get it out of here. Nope. I'll get it out of here. Yes, it's this one. System collections generic. But nope. Damn it. Ah. Good. That's like the Java equivalent of collections. Oh, wow. Inventory game object does not contain a... Okay, that's fine. Game objects line 137. This doesn't have the constructor that takes... maybe my fancy pants plan to not... Okay, here's what's happening. I made this inventory game object, which I still think was a good move, but I didn't give it any code. So what I need to do is say public inventory game object, and in row, in column, basically the game object constructor. Yeah, this I need to call that so that constructor still exists. No. Nah. What was it? Token. No, it was a string. Not sting. String, token, and what was this? Screen Not Stack Overflow exception. Jesus. No. Damn it. Screen. And this needs to call the base class constructor for row, column, token, screen. Boom. Let's see if that one goes away. It did. Okay, random does not exist. Okay, that's in screen. Screen doesn't have random. Adventure had random, which I think... Well, let's see. Screen. Well, that's not a good sign. Oh, you know what? Random. Yeah. It doesn't have a random for moving mobs. So I put the random in adventure. Yeah, this thing. So, well, here's a question. If I get rid of this... Yeah, okay, so this was in game. Okay, let's look for other... Actually, let's do this. Yeah, see, 0 references. So this literally can go. Right, this is no longer used in here. Like, we had this, but nobody's using it. So now this can move into screen and become an instance variable. Yeah, because why the hell not? And let's see if this realizes... Yeah, it has 1 reference now. Okay, good. Boom. Screen does not contain a definition for add, and no accessible method extension. Whatever. What line is that? 49 in Adventure? Adventure has a 49. Right, add. What did I call the method in screen for adding a mob? I called it add mob. Here I called it add. That's obviously wrong. Add mob. The property indexer moving GameObject.token cannot be used because the set accessor is inaccessible. Okay. That's on line 40 of screen. Let's fix that. Mob.token. Oh, okay. Well, let's try this. Code mob.cs. Mob extends moving GameObject. Okay. Oh, that seems legit. The set accessor is inaccessible. Well, let's look at this. What do we have for our new moving GameObject? What constructor do we have? Row, column, token, screen. And token equal token. Oh, this is protected. Would be visible to subclasses. This now needs to be internal. And the reason for that is if we make it protected, subclasses can see it. But moving GameObject token, that's on line 40 of screen. Who's calling the method? Well, we're calling it in screen. Screen's no longer a subclass, right? This is another class, so we have to make it internal. That's what's going on there. Screen.move mobs, not all code paths return a value. Okay, I'll fix that. Line 24 of screen. Not everything returns a path. Oh, right. You know why? Oh, yeah, duh. Okay, yeah. Okay, duh, Spacco, you ding-dong. Return false. Good. So, what we're saying is we've got this move mobs. This returns true if any mob kills the player, false otherwise. So we go through all the mobs, we move the mob. If it killed the player, set it to the splat, return true. Otherwise, move the mob. It didn't kill the player, go to the next one. Keep doing that. And if we've gone through all the mobs and nobody returned true because they killed the player, then we just end. So this means there could be like 10 mobs, and maybe the first one can move and kill the player. We don't want to bother to move the other ones. It's turn-based. All right, good. All right, and screen line 84. The given expression is never of the provided player type. Okay, let's see what that means. That's a warning, not an error. So it's noting that Boolean is legal move. I'm doing some nonsense in here. Oh, yeah. I'm checking if something's passable or it's a player. Oh, because players are always passable, I guess? But since players are no longer... Oh, so the reason we're getting this warning is other, which is of type GameObject, can never be a player because player's no longer a GameObject. So this warning, the compilers figured that out. It's like, listen, other can't possibly be of type player because player is not even part of the same inheritance hierarchy. So we can actually get rid of this. I'm loving this. This is so cool. I'm glad I took an hour to do this. Oh my god. Let's see if this works. Alright. So far, so good. Okay. Can this kill me? No. Alright. It can't kill me. Oh, it got me. Well, sometimes it can kill me. Unless it just missed me every time. It got me again. But it's splatting me in the wrong place. So it's splatting me before the mob moves. Okay, so there's still some funkiness in the moving of the mobs. There's still some funkiness when we move the mob. And if the player doesn't move, we kind of... There's some shit going down. Okay, let's think about this. Let's look back at our move mobs. So we're going through each of the mobs. We're getting a list of the legal moves for that mob. We're randomly picking one, and then we're like, hey, move... Yeah, these are only legal moves. So we get the move, and then we're like, okay, if... Oh. No, we moved the delta row, delta column. So this is the new location, which is fine. Okay. And then we're saying, like, if the player happens to be there, then splat the player. So we've moved the mob to the new location. And then we're like, what's going on here? And then splat the player. Okay. Now, oh, I wonder... So the player always moves... Well, actually, that's a good question. Does the player move first? Maybe. So clearly... Oh, and this... because this would be game over. It then prints the screen. Okay. And then it would end. Well, there's some work here. Like here's a thing. Well, first of all, here's a thing we can do here. Boolean mob kill. And we could say if mob kill message equal you are dead. Okay. Yeah, see, that's not very good. I'm clearly being killed by this mob. Oh, wow, I can be dead multiple... Oh, and the mob's still moving. It didn't end the game. Oh, right, that's my fault. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Mob kill, message you are dead, and game over equal true. So that would make sure that the game ends. Okay, this is not the worst. This is not the worst. And so this all sort of like moves the player. Well, this would action the player. This moves the player, which is fine. And then once we've moved the player, if a mob can jump on and kill the player, the mob should hopefully do that. There's something a little funky in here that would need to be figured out. I don't know if I'm going to figure it out tonight, though. Like, I feel like we've made really good progress. We're just debugging at this point. Yeah, so... We're splatting. We're splatting. We're getting the you are dead, so clearly the mob is killing the player. Well, we could put in debugging to figure out where the mob is. There's things we can do. there's things we can do to sort of debug this. Oh, and I have breakable walls. That's the other thing I've got. Okay, we've got treasure, we've got player. The mob is at a certain location. Yeah, I mean this is not terrible. There's a little bit of stuff to do because it's possible for a player to end up on the same spot as a mob, which we don't particularly want, but whatever. Okay, so I don't feel like debugging because it's 12:30. I gotta go to bed. So let's do this. Git diff -- name - only git add adventure. Let me make sure I'm on the right branch. Git branch. Right, good. Git add adventure.cs, GameObjects.cs, player.cs, and screen.cs, and then git commit -m. I'll say refactored to put mobs into the screen class. Okay. And then I'll say git push solution. So this will be on my GitHub but not yours. Although you could just go back and watch this to see everything. I should stop recording and start uploading the video and everything. But I do want to figure this out, but I also and I would want to rename moving. There's more stuff to do. Rename moving game object. It could be in here somewhere. How? It could be in here where like somehow like this is just for yeah, so now okay, here's another refactoring. Moving game object shouldn't be in, first of all, it shouldn't be called moving game object. It should be like movable thing or something like that, something else. So it shouldn't be in there, but then also like it should be in a different file or a different class at least because it's mixing too much shit together. But it should also yeah. This is nice to be able to pull things out of there. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's some issue with, because now players and mobs, like the only way, well, okay, what could happen? Can a player jump onto a mob? Oh, If a player goes where a mob is, but then the mob moves, what happens? Does the mob... that's another possibility. It would be like, there's a mob here, the player jumps on them. Does the mob notice that and then splat itself, but then also move? Is that what's happening? There's a lot of a lot of possibilities, but I'm very tired, so I'm going to